Hi, this is Matt Baker, and today I'm going to explain to you the line of succession to the British throne as of February 2022. I covered this topic 4 years ago, and then again 2 years ago, but there's been several changes since then, so I thought another update was in order. Also, next month, the Queen will celebrate her Platinum Jubilee, celebrating a record-breaking 70 years on the throne. So what better time to talk about some of the more famous members of the British royal family, as well as some of the more lesser-known ones. So let's get to it. Currently, Queen Elizabeth has 24 direct descendants, 4 children, 8 grandchildren, and 12 great-grandchildren. These 24 individuals are thus the first 24 people in the line of succession. First in line is, of course, her eldest son, Charles. Born in 1948, Charles is also her eldest child. Some people mistakenly think that his sister, Princess Anne, is the eldest child, but she was actually born in 1950. Making her the second-born. In the United Kingdom, the first in line to the throne, aka the heir apparent, is usually given the title Prince of Wales. I say usually because, to date, it has only ever been given to a male. For example, prior to becoming monarch, Queen Elizabeth was not the Princess of Wales, even though she was first in line to the throne. In other words, the title Prince of Wales is not a title that someone gets automatically. In the case of Charles, he received it at age 9, 6 years after his mother became queen. However, Prince of Wales is not the only title that Charles holds. The next two most important are the English title, Duke of Cornwall, and the Scottish title, Duke of Rothesay. These two titles were automatically given to him as soon as his mother became queen, as they are always automatically given to the person who is first in line to the throne, as long as that person is male. From 1981 to 1996, Charles was married to Diana, who was thus the Princess of Wales. Together, they had 2 children, William and Harry. But as you probably know, Diana died in a tragic car accident in 1997. Charles has since remarried to Camilla, the woman he was in love with prior to marrying Diana. Although Camilla now has the legal right to use the title Princess of Wales, she does not. Instead, she uses Duchess of Cornwall, since that is her husband's next most important title. In fact, the couple also has indicated that when Charles becomes king, she will not use the title Queen Consort. Instead, she will be known as the Princess Consort. Now, another mistaken belief out there is that Charles is ineligible to become king because he's a divorcee who married a divorcee, Camilla having been previously married to a man named Andrew Parker Bowles. This misunderstanding is based on the fact that back in 1936, King Edward VIII gave up the throne in order to marry an American divorcee named Wallis Simpson. But times were different back then. In the 1930s, the Church of England, of which the British monarch is the head, did not permit divorced people to remarry. But in 2002, that prohibition was dropped. Charles and Camilla married in 2005, 3 years after the change. So there's nothing stopping Charles from becoming king. A related rumor is that the Queen has simply declared that she will skip Charles and automatically pass the throne to William. This is simply not true. Whether people like it or not, the fact is, when Queen Elizabeth dies, Charles, so long as he survives his mom, will become king. At that point, he will become Charles III or possibly George VII, as monarchs can actually choose their regnal name. Okay, moving on. The United Kingdom follows a hereditary system known as primogeniture, which means that the throne always passes from firstborn to firstborn, not from sibling to sibling. So after Charles, the next person in line is not one of his younger siblings, but rather his oldest son, William. prior to his marriage, William was known simply as Prince William of Wales. However, when he married Kate Middleton, he was given a dukedom, as is the custom. So nowadays he is best known as the Duke of Cambridge, and his wife as Catherine, the Duchess of Cambridge. Now, I should point out that in most cases, these dukedoms are simply ceremonial titles. Originally, a duke would have been in charge of a territory known as a duchy, but there is no Duchy of Cambridge. So basically, the title Duke of Cambridge is just a title. There are, however, two exceptions to this. Earlier, I mentioned that Charles is the Duke of Cornwall. Well, there is in fact a Duchy of Cornwall, spread out over England, and that duchy exists in order to provide income to the heir apparent. The other real duchy is the Duchy of Lancaster, being the lands that are held by the Queen herself, in order to provide income to the monarch. So, unofficially, the Queen, in addition to being the Queen, is also the Duke of Lancaster. I'd also like to point out that unofficially, she is also the Duke of Normandy, which is a title that goes all the way back to William the Conqueror. Although the Duchy of Normandy, which was located primarily in France, no longer exists, England does still control the islands of Jersey and Guernsey, and thus, in those two locations, the Queen is still known as the Duke of Normandy. But back to the line of succession. After William comes his three children, Prince George, Princess Charlotte, and Prince Louis. Now, I've heard several people say that this is unfair, and that Prince Harry should come directly after William. However, what those people forget is that if the succession rules were to be changed to give siblings priority over children, then the throne would have to pass to Charles's siblings first, before both William and Harry. Thus, in that scenario, Harry would still be number 6. Now, at this point, I do want to point out a change in the succession rules that was made back in the year 2013. Prior to this date, the UK followed what's called male preference primogeniture, which means that sons were given priority over daughters. So, under this system, Louis would have come before his older sister Charlotte. But since 2013, the UK follows absolute primogeniture, which means that the line of succession now simply follows birth order. Okay, so after William and Kate's children comes Prince Harry at number 6, whose formal name is actually Prince Henry, Harry simply being a nickname. He, as you probably know, married the American actress Meghan Markle in 2018. At that time, they were given the titles Duke and Duchess of Sussex. Since then, they have had 2 children, Archie and Lilibet, who are currently numbers 7 and 8 in the line of succession. Now, at this point, I want to explain the terms prince and princess. Generally speaking, in the UK, this designation is only given to the children of the monarch, as well as the male line grandchildren. So, for example, the Queen's son Charles is, of course, a prince, along with the Queen's 2 grandchildren through him, William and Harry, since they are in the male line. However, although the Queen's daughter Anne is a princess, her 2 children are not prince and princess, because they are not in the male line. So take note that on this chart, anyone who is a prince or princess has a special crown symbol next to their number. Which brings me back to William and Harry's children. In 2012, prior to any of these 5 children being born, and prior even to Harry meeting Meghan, the Queen decided that any and all children born to William would receive princely titles, being that they would be in the direct line of succession. So only in this one exception would any of the monarch's great-grandchildren get to be a prince or princess. Now, this created a bit of a controversy once Harry had children, because his children were not given the titles of prince and princess. However, I should point out that once Charles becomes king, they will, legally speaking, automatically become prince and princess as the male line grandchildren of the king. Now, Whether or not they will actually use those titles is yet to be seen, because as of right now, Harry and Meghan have stated that they wish for their children to grow up as private citizens, not as royals. This is because back in 2020, Harry and Meghan decided to step down from their royal roles, due in part to the strain that the media's racist treatment toward Meghan was having on their mental health. Meghan is mixed race, having a black mother and a white father. However, a lot of people have misunderstood what Harry and Meghan's so-called departure from the royal family actually means. For one thing, it does not mean that Harry or his children have been removed from the line of succession. They are, in fact, still numbers 6, 7, and 8. And Harry and Meghan are still a duke and duchess, as well as a prince and princess. Harry is a prince by right of birth, and Meghan is a princess by right of marriage, just like Kate. The only real change is that they are no longer working members of the royal family. This means that they no longer represent the Queen in any official capacity. They no longer have any royal patronages. Harry no longer holds any honorary military appointments, and both of them no longer use the terms His or Her Royal Highness. Now, all of this is important because there's a similar situation with regard to the next person on the list, albeit for a very different reason. As I mentioned earlier, the Queen's next eldest child after Charles is actually Anne. However, because Anne was born back when male preference primogeniture was still in effect, and because the 2013 change was not retroactive, she is placed in the line of succession after her two younger brothers and their descendants. This means that the next person is actually Prince Andrew at number 9. Now here's the thing. Prince Andrew was, for many years, close friends with the convicted child sex trafficker Jeffrey Epstein. And Andrew is currently facing his own trial for allegedly raping one of Epstein's underage victims. Because of the trial, the Queen recently removed all of Andrew's royal patronages and military titles, as well as his right to use the phrase His Royal Highness. However, no person, even if convicted of a crime and sent to prison, is ever removed from the line of succession. A person can only be removed by dying, or by Parliament passing a special law, or by becoming the monarch and then abdicating. So Andrew still sits at number 9. He also still holds the title Duke of York, which traditionally is given to the second-born son of the monarch. Now, Andrew has 2 daughters with his former wife, Sarah Ferguson. So the next person in line is his eldest daughter, Princess Beatrice. Note that she's a princess because she's a male line grandchild. Beatrice married Italian noble Edoardo Mozzi in 2020, and just last year they had their first child, a daughter named Sienna, who now sits at number 11. Beatrice also has a stepson named Christopher, who is Edoardo's son from a previous relationship. That child, nor Edoardo himself, are in the line of succession, as spouses and stepchildren are never included. To be in the line of succession, you have to be either a descendant of the current monarch or the descendant of a previous monarch. Okay, Beatrice's sister Eugenie comes next at number 12. Eugenie is married to Jack Brooksbank, and they have a son named August, who is number 13. Then comes the Queen's third son, Prince Edward, who is married to Sophie. Currently, they hold the titles Earl and Countess of Wessex. Note that in the UK, an Earl is the same rank as a Count. And since there is no female equivalent of an Earl's wife is called a Countess. So why is Edward an Earl instead of a Duke? Well, this is because he is waiting to receive the title of Duke of Edinburgh, which was previously held by his father, Prince Philip. And speaking of Prince Philip, I should probably mention a few things about him. He, of course, died just last year, just 2 months before he would have turned 100. I've sometimes been asked why he was called a prince instead of a king. To explain, let's go back one generation to Queen Elizabeth's parents, King George VI, and Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother. In the UK, whenever the reigning monarch is a male, he is called a king, and his wife is called a queen. However, please note that there are two different types of queens. A queen who is married to a king is simply a queen consort. Queen Elizabeth II is a different type of queen. Because her father did not have any sons, she became the reigning monarch after his death. She is thus a queen regnant, meaning she's the one who holds the position of monarch, not her husband. In the UK, whenever there's a queen regnant, her husband is called a prince rather than a king. Please also note that a queen regnant is different from a queen regent. A queen regent is simply a temporary position, one in which a mother serves on behalf of an underaged monarch. Queen Elizabeth is not a queen regent. She's a queen regnant, and only queen regnants are numbered. The current queen is Elizabeth II because this person was Queen Elizabeth I. Her mother, although she was also named Elizabeth, does not count because she was merely a consort, not a reigning monarch. But back to Prince Philip. In addition to being Prince Consort, he was also given the title Duke of Edinburgh. During his lifetime, he expressed his wish that this title would eventually go to his third son, Edward. But even though Philip has now passed away, the title cannot go to Edward yet. In the UK, titles automatically pass to the eldest son. Therefore, technically, the current Duke of Edinburgh is Prince Charles. However, when Charles becomes king, he will no longer be able to hold any lesser titles. When this happens, the title will become extinct. At this point, he will then be able to bestow the title anew on his brother Edward. As Edward is unlikely to ever become king, the title Duke of Edinburgh will probably stay in his branch of the family in the future, with Edward's son James eventually inheriting the title someday. Note that James, who is number 15, as well as his sister Louise, who is number 16, do not have the prince and princess symbols, even though they are male line grandchildren. Legally, they do have the right to be prince and princess. However, their parents have chosen to raise them without these titles in order to lessen the pressure on them. Note that they also both use the surname Mountbatten-Windsor. Generally speaking, the senior members of the royal family do not use surnames, but the junior members of the royal family use Mountbatten-Windsor. Mountbatten is the name of Prince Philip's family, and Windsor, of course, is the name of the current royal house. Some people have wondered whether the name of the royal house will change from Windsor to Mountbatten after Queen Elizabeth dies. Although this would indeed be what usually would happen, in this case it will most likely not happen, as Queen Elizabeth has clearly stated her wish that the royal house name remain Windsor in perpetuity. Okay, next up is the Queen's only daughter, Princess Anne. Like I said earlier, she's actually older than both Andrew and Edward, but because she was born under the earlier male preference system, she and her descendants come after them and their descendants. Anne holds the special title of Princess Royal. Traditionally, this title is given to the eldest daughter of a monarch. So if a monarch has several daughters, there will only ever be one Princess Royal. The next person to hold the title will likely be Princess Charlotte. However, this will only happen after the death of Princess Anne and after her father William becomes king. Anyway, Anne was previously married to Mark Phillips, with whom she had 2 children, Peter and Zara. However, she is currently married to retired Navy officer Timothy Lawrence. Like I mentioned earlier, Peter and Zara are not a prince and princess because they are female line grandchildren of the Queen, but they are still in the line of succession. Peter currently sits at 18, with his 2 young daughters at 19 and 20. Zara is therefore now at 21, with her 3 children at 22, 23, and 24. Zara, along with both her mother and father, have all competed in the Olympic Games in the equestrian sports, and she is currently married to a former rugby player, Mike Tyndall. So that takes care of the first 24 people in the line of succession, all direct descendants of the current monarch, Queen Elizabeth. The next 6 people are all descendants of the Queen's younger sister, Margaret, who passed away back in 2002. Margaret is often confused with Anne, but please note that Anne is the Queen's daughter, and Margaret was the Queen's sister. So coming in at number 25 is Margaret's son David, who inherited his father's title, Count of Snowdon. He is followed by his 2 children, Charles and Margarita. Next comes his sister, Lady Sarah Chatto, and her 2 sons, Samuel and Arthur. That takes care of all the living descendants of King George VI. To continue down the line of succession, we thus have to look farther back in the tree. First of all, let me point out that King George's older brother Edward, who served as King Edward VIII before stepping down to marry Wallis Simpson, did not have any children. But even if he did, they would not have been included in the line of succession, because when he abdicated, he gave up his rights to the throne for both himself and any potential descendants. After abdication, he and his wife were known as the Duke and Duchess of Windsor. However, King George did have several younger brothers, and therefore the descendants of those younger brothers come next in the line of succession. We start with the descendants of Prince Harry, Duke of Gloucester. His eldest son William died in a plane crash, and therefore it was his second son, Prince Richard, who ended up inheriting his titles. Richard, a first cousin to Queen Elizabeth, is therefore next in the line of succession, after all the descendants of the Queen and the Queen's sister. He currently sits at number 31. Interestingly, though, he is actually the most senior agnatic member of the House of Windsor. Agnatic means coming from a strictly male-only line. I won't go through all of his children and grandchildren, but basically they make up numbers 32 through 40. Next comes the descendants of King George's younger brother George, who was Duke of Kent. Now, wait a second, you might say. How can a George have a brother who is also named George? Well, remember how I mentioned earlier that a monarch can actually choose their regnal name? Well, before he became king, George VI was actually known as Albert. His younger brother George, who is thought to have been bisexual, died in a military plane crash during World War II. The current Duke of Kent is therefore his eldest son, Prince Edward, who is currently number 41 in the line of succession. Edward's children and grandchildren therefore come in at numbers 42 through 51. Included here is the fashion model Lady Amelia Windsor at number 43. Her older brother Edward is the most senior person to be excluded from the line of succession because he chose to become a Catholic. Yes, Catholics are still prohibited from inheriting the throne. Nowadays, a royal can marry a Catholic without losing their rights, but they themselves cannot be a Catholic. In fact, they can't be anything other than a Protestant. So, no Jews, Hindus, or Buddhists either. Anyway, next comes Edward's younger brother, Prince Michael of Kent, and his descendants, as well as their sister, Princess Alexandra, and her descendants. This takes us all the way down to number 63. Note that these 4 individuals all hold the rank of prince or princess, but their descendants do not. This is because the 4 of them are all male line grandchildren of a former monarch. Because of this, they do still perform royal duties from time to time. King George VI did have a 4th brother named John, but unfortunately, John had epilepsy and died at age 13. There was, however, one more sibling, a sister named Mary. She was the person who held the title of Princess Royal before Princess Anne. Her descendants, through her 2 sons, are at positions 64 through 94. We've now covered every living descendant of King George V. But the line of succession does not end there. If we want to continue, we would next look at the descendants of his siblings, and then the descendants of the previous monarch's siblings, and so forth. Doing this, we would find that the King of Norway actually sits somewhere in the 100s in the line of succession to the British throne. And eventually, we would find the King of Spain and the King of Sweden as well. Being that most people with British descent can somehow trace a line back to some medieval English king, does this mean that pretty much every Protestant in the English-speaking world fits somewhere in the line of succession? Well, no. The line of succession does not go on forever. Because of certain laws passed a long time ago by the Parliament, in order to be included in the line of succession, you have to be a Protestant descendant of this person here, Sophia of the Palatinate. This is why the Jacobite line, which is technically more senior, does not currently hold the throne. If you want to learn more about that, we've got a video about it, which I'll link to in the description. Okay, one last thing. What would happen if Prince Charles were to die before his mother? Would the throne then pass to Prince Andrew? Absolutely not. The order of the numbers on this chart always stays the same. If someone dies, everybody below them simply goes up one position. And if someone has a new baby, everyone below them simply goes down one position. So, for example, if Harry and Meghan were to have another child, that child would be placed at number 9, and Prince Andrew would fall to number 10, Beatrice to number 11, and so forth. If it so happens that a child inherits the throne, that child will simply be assigned a regent to take care of matters before the child becomes of age. Okay, so that was a look at the current line of succession to the British throne. If you're interested in royal history, I'd suggest you take a look at the posters available at usefulcharts.com. Not only do we have one that covers Western Europe, but we also have ones for Eastern Europe and Asia as well. Thanks for watching.